the recording. So this morning we're going to discuss things that have to do with family formation. Morning, Andrea. And well, in demographic terms, we call this nuptiality, but it's not a word that is widely used in English. So most of the times in English we refer to family formation or family unions and all these things. But the official name is nuptiality, which again I don't even know if that word exists in English outside the demographic field. But in Spanish it's nupcialidad, and it's actually widely used in Spanish, and that is because I think again I don't know if I told you this this at the beginning of the semester, but we have two major perspectives or traditions in demography. One comes from the French school, and they are more they pay more attention to these topics such as fertility, family formation, and they try to frame everything on these big two things. And of course, they have studies of mortality and everything, but they are more focused in this part, like more fertility and more family formation, and something that we're going to discuss this morning. And then we have the American school, which is more in the social. It comes from sociology, and it's more trying to understand markets and economics and all these things. So one school, well, in Mexico we get both, so we always struggle in between these two. But some topics are better studied in France. There's the equivalent to the to the CONAPO that they have. It's not even CONAPO. It's a really important center that they have for demographic studies. It's called the INED. This has always been a reference in demography. And yes, so that was because I was thinking that the word is usually more used in Romance languages, and I believe that is because we are influenced by the French school. But that was something just additional. Let me share my screen. So I uploaded the slides for this morning, but let me double check, because I think that I also uploaded one Excel file. That this Excel file, actually I uploaded it because I don't want you to, well, you don't have to go online and find the information for your state. Yes, it's called Nuptiality. But if you want to, you can do it. But this morning we can work with information for Mexico, which is the one that we're going to be using this morning. Okay. So it's 8:35. I think we waited enough for the rest of your classmates. Well, most of you are here. So this morning is going to be a really, well, I believe, an easygoing session. I think I don't think we're going to spend the 1 hour and 15 minutes, but we'll see. So it's called it's about nuptiality and the second demographic transition. So the first part, we're going to discuss these measures and these measurements and how we estimate or we study family formation or union formation in general. And then we're going to discuss trying to put everything together, the things that we learn or that we already know from fertility, and the things that we are going to learn this morning about unions and everything, and try to frame this in what we call the second demographic transition. Okay. Of course, you should remember probably the first one, but again, there will be a review at this stage. So essentially, when I talk about nuptiality, I mean, or we're talking about the study of how frequent, who's getting married, the dissolution of marriages as well, and everything that is associated with that information, with this event. And again, this was developed when marriage was the standard norm, the standard. But now, in modern perspectives, we can even talk about cohabitation and second unions, and just a union. And we are going to discuss something really interesting when we talk about the second demographic transition. But the importance of this is that we know that being in a union, call it cohabitation or getting married, is associated with fertility levels. So we know that not all not all fertility comes from unions, like from formal unions, but at least we know that the likelihood of uh, pregnancy and everything is higher when couples are in these types of unions. And also, if we try to think about like demographic perspective and the things that we should be paying attention to as demographers or actuaries working in these things, is that if we are studying benefits for retirement, we need to understand, I don't know if, well, probably you remember this annuity that I was like, okay, so this annuity is going to pay but after this person dies. So that was essentially a retirement plan for a married couple, right? So if we are developing that, we need to understand the probability first that this person will reach retirement age, being in a union, and a union that we can recognize or we can acknowledge as an existing union in our pension plans, and then use these types of life annuities that, again, we are not going to do that in this class, but again, we need to understand the process. And I think one problem that I gave you last semester was assume that the probability of reaching this stage in a union is one. Essentially, we are going to ignore the likelihood of a union dissolution and everything in these things. But officially, we will have to do these things or this perspective to try to understand what is happening. And we are not going to reach that stage like studying it, but at least to know that we could, if we want to, get information on these things. And so I was telling you, the research on this topic is more developed in certain countries. France is one of the pioneers in these studies, but we have different things. More developed countries have uh, moved to these new living arrangements that are atypical. And in Latin America, actually, we are trying to debating or uh, going against this framework, because we say, okay, you started from this ideal perspective, but our perspective is not that it's not ideal, but it's different from your life experience. And we will discuss that later. But again, this is something that is displaying a general pattern, and it's always nice to be able to talk about these things. And probably if you find some rates that, or some information in your estimations for fertility or for reproduction, you could probably frame those things with the information from second demographic transition when you are writing your report. Just go online, go to Wikipedia and read about it. And we will discuss the main things about second demographic transition this morning, but again, it's not something that we will spend a lot of time. So if we go to INEGI, and again, I didn't ask you to go to INEGI, but again, if you want to, when you are looking for population, probably you remember that you have the option to select total population. Then was population ages. For some census was 3 and older. For some other census was 5 and older. And that has to do with the questions that they were asking to specific groups of people. And then there was another one for population ages 12 and older. So the thing is, for instance, there are questions in the census that if they ask, for instance, where was this person living 5 years ago? It doesn't make any sense to ask that question to a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old because they were not around. Or also, if this person knows how to read and write. Again, if you ask a baby, the answer is going to be no. So you will have additional no's that are going to affect the estimation of literacy in the country. So INEGI has, if you go to again to the website for census, you're gonna find the questionnaire for each year, and then you will see that they say, okay, for everybody who's this age and older, ask this question. For everybody who's this age and older, ask this question. So if we select those who are ages 12 and older, we're going to find the option to select situación conyugal, and I think, yeah, that's the expression that they use in the census, situación conyugal, or marital status. And we can analyze that by age group, by gender, and again, using all the variables that we already know. In Mexico, we usually have these categories. We have single individuals, those who are in union libre or cohabitation, those who are married, divorced, separated, and those who like everybody who's widowed. And in Mexico, if you open this information under the married category, you will see that you can open this further, and then we make the distinction between, okay, they are only married by the church, or they have a marriage on the for the authorities, and they have both. And even though the law says that people are not supposed to get married only by church, a lot of people actually only has that type of marriage. So it is important. So we try to measure those things. But again, we have everything in the same category, and then you can identify specific things. So if we, and this comes from this Excel file that I uploaded. So if you want to explore these things, this is women and men for 2000 and 2020. So I decided to go to the extremes on the information that I have. We have these things. So essentially, this is the proportion, or the proportional relevance or the significance of each type of union by age group and gender for 2000 and 2020. So 2002 are the two on the left, and 2020 the two at the right of the screen. So not surprisingly, and well, this is always nice to see, is that at age 12 to 14 and really young ages, the most important marital status for men and women is being single, which is the blue line here. And of course, this is gonna go down with age. But something important is, I think I mentioned this when we were talking about fertility. Not everybody leaves this state, or this status. So a lot of people will end up at the end, again, 75 and older, the likelihood of you changing status is really, really small, but it could happen. And something that we know is that more women, actually, or a higher proportion of women, are in this status than men. And this has to do with many things, but also with we have more women in the population than men. So just from the beginning, we have an imbalance in there, and then we have these two things. And something that we can see also is that the proportion reaching this or staying in this state has increased for both, for men and women, but we can see more the increase here. So more people are staying single throughout their lives. Then we have the orange one, and the orange one is essentially being married. And we see that in 2000 was like a big chunk of this distribution. So most people was married, or at least in for certain age groups, of course. And again, we see that this is more permanent for men than for women. As you can see, women decline faster. And again, again, like, think about Mexico in 2000. That was before legal marriage for same-sex couples, because some people think about this, oh, that's the consequence of that, but no, that was before. And so here we have to understand that it has to do with life expectancy that is different for men and women, and so many things. So in that, since I already mentioned life expectancy, it is, of course, it makes sense that more women than men reach these age groups being widows. Okay, because again, men die earlier in life, so the likelihood of women reporting this status is higher. So we see these proportions. But the most significant change, I would say, in these things is the gray area. The gray area essentially is cohabitation, or union libre, as we call it in Mexico. And as you can see, yes, there has always been a cohabitation in Mexico and Latin America, which is something that we need to understand that probably for some European countries, cohabitation was almost non-existent before, but for Mexico, it has always been around. But it's a different cohabitation than the cohabitation we find in Europe. But between 2000 and 2020, as you can see, we have these big areas, which again, and it makes sense probably because, again, we are here at UTLab, and we know people, and a lot of students are here. And probably couples that decided to move in together and want to move together, and just not because they were planning to getting married, or probably they were, but it's something that is more common amongst us that it used to be even 20 years ago. So I would say that probably, I think most of my friends, yes, were in cohabitation before moving into getting married, and some of them actually are still in cohabitation and they are not planning on leaving that state. So that is something that is becoming more common, and there are two types of cohabitation. One is, again, is like a trial before actually getting married, or the other is just that is the thing that they decide to do, and they stay in cohabitation for all of their lives. And then, of course, we have an increase in separation and divorce, and again, what happens with people losing their life partners in later life. So this thing, and this is something that you can get for your estate. Again, you don't have to, but it's always try to understand what is happening. And yes, and I think this is something that we know is happening, and we see these people, or for instance, my grandmother, she's always telling me, nowadays everybody goes and they live together without getting married. And probably 20 years ago, she was like losing it because of that. And now she's like, oh, that's nice. Yes, because if they don't like each other, they can just move on with their lives. So even for this population, she's 86. Even for this population, there is a change in the way that they see these things. And yes, my grandma is 86. So both my grandmas are actually 86. And those are the only ones that are alive. My grandfathers are dead. But again, we see, yeah, but again, she is old. Yes, she's old, but she wasn't always like the traditional woman, because she got a divorce in 1960. Mhm. So, oh yes, but remember, I come from rural Mexico. So she got my mom when she was really young, and then my mom got married when she was young. So probably the age at what your grandparents had kids, or I don't know how many kids they had, was different. And then by the time your parents get married, that was a long time. Mhm. Okay, yes. So they had you when they were older. My parents got me when they were, but by my age, my parents had already 4 children. They were already thinking of retiring and everything. But again, is something that changes between regions and states, and of course, size of things. But for instance, I have friends. I have friends like my age who are already becoming grandparents, which again, uh, these things happen. Okay, so we have all these things, and we need to understand that, again, this is something that is happening. This is something that we know is changing. So there are some people actually really well invested on studying these things. If you want to learn about these things in Mexico, you can Google Julieta Quilodran. That's her name. She retired like 5 years ago, but she was the expert. She's still the expert on these things in Mexico and Latin America, and she spent all her life studying these things. So anyways, so we see this. We have these descriptive statistics. We can try to we can see these changing patterns, and probably if we have more years, we could try to have a projection of what are we expecting to happen in the following years. And we have surveys that are really interesting, that essentially, as I was telling you, we have surveys that ask, okay, so at what age you moving with your partner, or tell me if you were single or married or in cohabitation at this age. So we can track changes in men and women experiences, and that was the reason I was telling you. For some people, it's just a trial period before getting married, and for some people, it's just that is the ideal for them. So of course, we need to have a measure of these things. So because it's not only just talking about cohabitation and how this is increasing, but let's find a way to measure how these things are changing. So the main indicator that we have, and again, this is thinking about marriage being the key event for many things, for fertility, for even for the growth of cities and these things, is what we call the SMAM, or the single mean age at marriage, which essentially measures the average length of single life, just like that, expressed in years. So essentially, it's like person years lived being single before getting married and before age 50, because we are assuming that after age 50, chances of changing from being single to being married to being well, essentially those two states, is not that significant. And yet we can see here people who are single actually is declining. And yes, around age 50, there are no big changes. Of course, there are some changes happening, but not big ones. So the way we estimate this is really convenient, it's really easy, and I think I have it here. So yes. So I'm going to estimate, I think maybe this is for 2000. Yes, this is for 2000. The numbers that I have here in this presentation is 2000. So I'm going to replicate now for 2010 in Excel, so the values are not going to be the same, but you can follow me in these things. Okay. So the first thing that we need to get is the person years lived in the single state. So essentially, how many years of life you are spending, or a person is spending being single before moving into a different state or before dying, of course. So what we do is we start at age 15, and again, we're going to ignore those before age 15, but we're going to start at age 15. So we're assuming that everybody before age 15 was single. So that's the reason we have this 15 in here, right? So if we're going to start studying this at age 15, before that age, everybody was single. So everybody spent 15 years being single, okay? And then since we have 5-year age groups, what we're going to do, that's the reason I have this 5 in here, we're going to get the proportion of those who are single in each of these age groups, okay? So I'm just going to make this, but I think this is the total, right? Yes. Come on, computer, wake up. Yes. So since I want the proportion of those who are single, I'm gonna take single population, and I'm going to ignore those that are not telling me what is their marital status. So instead of dividing by total, I'm just going to divide by the total without that. So it would be like this. And again, so this is for women and for men. Yeah. So okay, and let's add these person years. So essentially, what I have to do is so A, 15 plus 5 times adding these things. So in 2020, it was 34. Yes, Victoria?
Sorry. We only do it if we want to. It's not.
You don't have to do it for your final project or anything, but this is just an additional topic. Remember that I told you that I didn't. I found out a couple of weeks ago that I didn't have anything planned for today, so I was like, okay,
Yes.
I have to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. But again, so what I got here is for women, they spend on average throughout their lives 34 years being single, and for men is 35.7. And again, this is 2020, and before, if we go to the year 2000, we got 26 and 24. So there's a big increase in here. meaning that they're spending more time being single. And yes, probably we don't see it that well, but yes, we can see that it's even getting like wider this plot, so it's more significant this part. And I believe yes. So what I did here, I just plotted those that were single by age group, and we see that we have more men being single, or we had in 2000 more men being single than women. And let me see, here is 99, 99, 6, 99, 3. So yes, the significance still there, but just if you pay attention to the second age group, we have 86.5% of women being single, but we still have 94.7% of men being single at the same age group, essentially around 20 to 24. Meaning, and again, we can see it in this graph, that women move out of singlehood faster than men, and that has to do with uh, traditionally, or we know that men tend to be older in couples than women. So that's the reason women leave this state sooner than men. And yet, here at the end of this plots, we see that these two lines cross. And the reason is because remember that we saw that we have more single women at age 50 than men, because men are still getting married. And yes, I have an uncle who got married when he was 52 for the first time, and he got married to a woman who was 20 something. So again, we know these things happen. There's a big discussion again, but again, these are things that we know are happening, and that's the reason we see this pattern in those who are still single. Now, so we have the average years that these people spend being single, or person years. Now we estimate the proportion of those remaining single at age 50. So what we do is we just take the average between those being single at age 45 to 49 and those being single. Wait a minute, I'm doing it wrong. Nobody tells me anything. I am only supposed to add from 15 to 49. So I don't need this one because it was 12 to 14. And I actually need that one, but I am not going to include it. So yeah, the change was not that significant. So now it's 27, 29, 26, well, 24 and 23. So it's still a big increase. Okay. Now, for B, I need to get, as I was telling you, the average proportion of people being single at age 50, which we usually assume that they are going to stay in that state like forever, right? So let me get B here. You have to do it like this. So in the year 2020, on average, 11% of women were staying single and 10% of men were in that state. But look for 2000, it was 7.7 for women and 6% for men, essentially. So we see an increase in both in men and women, but it's still, and even though the gap is narrowing, we still have more proportion of women remaining single at the end of their lives. And with this, we can estimate the proportions of ever married by age 50. And something important here is that since I am using those who are single, when I get this proportion, I am going to get those who were in one union ever. Because here I am including those who ever were in a cohabitation or those who were actually married. If we want to make this only for those who are married, at the beginning, I should have taken into account here not only those who were single, but also those who were in cohabitation because they are not in an official marriage. But again, I am, instead of getting the singulate mean age at marriage, I am getting the singulate mean age at some union. Okay, so we have these values. Again, in 2000, we had 94% of men and 92% of women. Now we have 89% of men, 90, and 88.8% for women. So we see some changes, slight changes, but probably not that big. And now we get the number of person years for those who never got married, how many years they actually spend being single. So since we're stopping at age 50, what we do is to take 50 years, and then we use the proportion that we got of those never getting married. So B, B. So we have for women 5.6 years, and for men 5 years. And then we just get this indicator, which is again something really easy. It's like a cooking recipe. It's A, B divided by C. 24 for women and 26.9 for men. And here what we got in 2000 was 22.7 for women and 25.3 for men. So this is an indicator essentially on average at what age in their lives men and women, in this area because I made a distinction between men and women, are moving into one union. Because here, remember, I am using cohabitation as essentially the same as being married. So we see that first we see a significant increase, more for women because they move from 22.7 to 24.2, and for men 25 and 26.8. So again, we see some increases, and yes, we know that people are pushing moving into unions. So let's just for the sake of getting a more refined estimation, let's exclude cohabitation. So essentially just those moving into marriage. So now you here, I will have to add cohabitation and those being single. And yes, as you can see, for women is 25 and for men 28. So that is the age where they are getting married. Again, not moving to cohabitation, but getting married on average. Which again is at older ages because, as I was saying, many new couples first move into cohabitation and then they move into marriage after this trial period, or sometimes after they have been in cohabitation and they start a family. Sometimes they just do it, and that was actually the case for many of my friends because they were planning on having babies, and let's say that only one of them had health insurance, like private health insurance, and they wanted to use that, so they got married before getting pregnant in order to be able to have the insurance to pay for the delivery and everything. So that was again. Sometimes it's just something like that. Sometimes I have friends, and as I was telling you, I have one friend who's a professor here at ULab, who has been cohabiting with her partner for more than 12 years. They got an apartment, they got cars, and they live like as a married couple, but they are not married. They just live in a cohabitation, and they are like really saying, okay, if one day stops working, see you, be happy. But they actually have been together more than many of my friends who got married. Yeah. So again, this change on perspectives and this change in cultural acceptance as well is something that is moving and is creating this new life and arrangements. So again, this is always something really nice to study if you have time, and if you want to discuss this further, we can have a session to discuss these new things. And even if you want that session in Spanish, so we can gossip about the things that are happening. Okay. So now, the second demographic transition. As I was telling you, this is not something that I just wanted to talk about. Like nuptiality was not a random thing that I decided to discuss. And the reason for this is, for many of you, when you estimate your fertility rates, you're gonna find fertility rates below replacement, and fertility rates that are, again, like for some states, are essentially lower than some European countries. And hopefully, I don't know if you are planning on doing this. If you want to explain, or you want to provide an explanation to your rates, you can just Google, okay, what is the meaning of TFR of this? And you're gonna find a lot of information in Europe and or more developed societies in terms of demographic patterns. And something that is gonna start popping out in your Google searches is the second demographic transition. So we have, and we discussed the first demographic transition, or what we just call the demographic transition. The demographic transition is something that is widely accepted. We know there are a few exceptions, some countries that had weird behaviors in these things, but it works to explain these changes in trends. And remember, there was essentially declining levels of mortality and fertility because a country was developing from a pre-industrialized society to a modern society with all these things. So it makes sense, again, that we want to reduce mortality, and then since we don't need 10 kids in order to keep 5 of them at the end of our life, fertility starts declining as well. Now, what happens with this is, and this started in Europe, and actually the authors of these were two Dutch demographers. I don't remember the last name of one, Lestage, or I think it's Lestage the way it is pronounced, and James Van de Kar. I know that the other name. So so they were actually studying what was going on in Europe, and they were like, okay, so we have the first demographic transition, everything is working, we understand why, how and why that happened, but now we are seeing all these changes in Europe. So because first the demographic transition was okay, so you're going to reach replacement levels and that's going to be fine. But what they saw, that countries were going even further down, like way below replacement, and they wanted to provide an explanation. So, and this is really, well, I want to say really recent, because it's younger than me. So this was created in 1986. That was when they came out with this idea, and they called it the second demographic transition as a way to explain these things. So essentially, the key components of the second demographic transition are the three things that I have here. So the first one is, we have fertility levels that are way below replacement. So in this scenario, again, we didn't have time to discuss why, besides the desired number of children, but why couples were having fewer and fewer kids. And that has to do with so many explanations on fertility change, even from having land and having to grow food in this land. So you need the free labor that your family, your children provide, to move into cities, and then you don't need this many kids to work. Well, probably in factories at the beginning, but then kids start getting more expensive because you have to send them to school, you have to provide basic resources. And then we have the role of the state moving in and saying, okay, if you send your kids to school, the school is going to be for free. This is going to be free, so you will have to pay for this. So we have all these things going on, but then we have the fertility was still going down, going down, going down, and now they were like, okay, now we need to understand why these people are not having children, or what are they expecting to happen by the end of their lives. And the thing is, again, one key component, and that is something that I hear a lot when with people my age, is like, who's gonna take care of you when you get old? Well, in Mexico, it's traditionally the family, and I don't know your grandparents at that age. I am assuming they don't live alone. Like my grandma lived by herself for a long time until one day she got really sick, and we couldn't get in because she was, even though we live in a really small town where crime is essentially somebody stealing some chicken out of your backyard, she was always putting all these gates and locks and everything. So it was really complicated to get into her or to reach her. So after that, my mom moved my grandma, and now she lives with my mom. So the thing is that here in Latin American countries and some Southern European countries, families are the ones taking care of the elderly. But in more industrialized countries and countries that have a really well funded and well planned welfare state, they're taking care of these old people. So they're sending people checking them. So they're moving into houses. They're moving into these residences that again is not here in Mexico. We still think asilo de anciano. You're gonna abandon your no. In some countries, these places are actually really nice. They get they are being taken care of. So again, people are thinking, okay, I don't need to have these kids because again, I can live fine by myself. And then when I'm really old, the state, because I have been paying taxes all my life, should take care of me. So that was one of the explanations. And another explanation that was the first point is we have to replace men fertility levels, and we will see some maps right now. Then we have the differences in living arrangement. And again, it stopped being only marriage, the norm. We start having cohabitation, divorce, second marriages, and all these things. And even some crazy things that I will give you some example later. That for even for now, for us now in Latin America, it's like, oh, I don't understand how this works. Probably for you it's gonna be easier, and for me it wasn't that complicated because again, my family has always been a mess in terms of where are we living, what are we doing, and these things. But for some people, even friends that were studying with me the master, and when we were learning about these things, they were like, I don't understand why. Why would they do that, right? So again, we have all this living arrangement. Again, it can be a cohabitation as a couple. It can be a cohabitation as a friends, and that is something that is always is also increasing, like living with friends. Your and not only here when you're here in Cholula having a roomie and everything, because that is a one specific stage in life. But later, I have friends who are 35, 37, 40, and they have roomies. So they are sharing an apartment. And yes, one explanation is so freaking expensive to live in Mexico City in specific areas. But some of them is just like, I can get this apartment, I could pay this apartment like by myself, but I want to have someone I can talk to, or I could share these things. So again, we have all these living arrangements that are different from what we are used to. And the last and more significant is the disconnection between marriage and procreation. Yes, Mexico City is well. I don't know if it's sobrevalorado, like, but it's too expensive. It's way too expensive. I really love Mexico City, but again, my experience was specific in that thing. But I don't hate living here. So again, I was okay moving out of Mexico City, but I love Mexico City. But again, many things. But again, then we have this disconnection between marriage and procreation. Again, not only having kids outside of the marriage when people are really young, but also later in life. People just decide to have kids and not moving into marriage or getting married. And the most significant of this thing was this disconnection was not only people having children out of marriage, but also people getting married and not having children, which is the most significant disconnection in general. Is just because before it was obvious, like, okay, you are getting married, you are becoming parents in 1 or 2 years after that. And now it's like you are getting married, you are becoming parents in 5, 10, 15 years, or probably never. So this disconnection between marriage and procreation is something that is a key component of this thing. And now we are seeing that happening in Mexico, as it happened in some other countries. But the most significant thing about this is like when we talk about the demographic transition, we are thinking mortality, fertility. So it's yes, there's something biological, and well, fertility is not only biological, but it's a rational perspective. It's a rational rational thing that people are like, okay, I don't want my kids to die, so I'm gonna have them vaccinated. I don't want this happening. I'm gonna do these things. But this second demographic transition was more like a cultural shift, like changing the way that we think about families, we think about unions and the things and many other things. Okay, so again, as I was telling you, Lestache and Van de Kar were the ones who came up with this in 1986. And again, we have to understand what was happening, and actually they were studying what happened after the war. And the thing was, during the war, and this is his hypothesis again. This is still being tested and still being um, uh, people are against these things, and we will see why. But he said, okay, during the war, uh, nobody knew if they were going to survive the following day. So there was a premarital intercourse. People started having intercourse in a different in a different perspective than before. So that was a weird stage, or probably they were getting married, but without getting married because churches were not open, and these things were happening. Which, again, it was a specific state or a specific period in the history that everything was weird, and probably in 20 years we're going to be talking about 2020 and something similar. However, even though people were doing that, and they found out that they could having intercourse before marriage, what happened after the war was, okay, people were still having intercourse before getting married. So that was something that during the war was like, okay, yes, like a free pass for saying something. But after the war, they were like, okay, now you should get married. So what happened was that since the social norm hadn't changed at that stage, the people started getting married before, like earlier in life. But what they did, since they were really young and they didn't want to have families yet, they started pushing having kids earlier in life. And again, this was the age when modern contraception was available or became available. So it was really easy for these young couples to move like childbearing later in life. So, but so that was a key disconnection. Again, now they could have more time, like being a young couple, traveling, having fun, and all these things. So again, this is something that probably started with the war, probably was already happening. We don't know, but it has a significant perspective or significant impact on this. So just for you to have an idea, this is from the U.S. Again, I decided not to. We can find some information from Mexico, but it was time consuming, so we can see what is happening in some other countries. So this is from the US. This is from, I think it's called the National Survey, yes, of Family Growth, the NSFG, which is a really nice survey. I have used that. I use this for, actually, I should recover that paper, trying to get it published. Okay, whatever. So what is happening is first, they compare 2002 and 2013 and 17. So they compare 1 year with one period because of the different, I believe, the sources they were using. So before, as you can see in the US, more people have been ever married and ever been in cohabitation. And in the more recent period, about 2013 to 17, more people had reported to being having been in a cohabitation, but fewer people ever get married. Again, we could think probably in 2002 with this trial period, like, okay, they are in cohabitation and then they're moving into getting married. So that was the reason cohabitation is smaller. But now we see some people that are in cohabitation that are not moving into marriage, which again is something that we know is happening, and we have information at least here from the US. And again, we have an increase in acceptance of people cohabiting. And again, in the US tends to be really conservative in these things, in these topics. But even in the US, 70% of people say that it's okay, even if they are not planning on getting married. So now this shift in perspective, so okay, if they want to live together, that's fine. And yeah, there's still a 14% that says that it's never acceptable to be in a cohabitation if they haven't getting married. So we have, again, these different perspectives, and if we, for instance, if we try to get this for California, from New York, and from for some other countries, it's going to be probably more open. If you go to Arkansas, uh, New Mexico, well, New Mexico is weird, Texas and these countries that are more conservative, these percentages probably will change. And then again, this is just something. Uh, if society is not being affected for this, well, there's 50-50. But again, this is a shift that is happening, and I don't know if there's one study of these things for Mexico, like asking people about attitudes on cohabitation and marriage. But again, it's always interesting to see these things or these patterns in life. As I was saying, there are some weird things going on in terms of living arrangements. So, as I was saying, something that we have to understand is cohabitation in Latin America has always been around. And even people on studying like historical demography, they go to records back then, like 1800s and these things, and we always find a relatively high cohabitation. And Mexico probably is not that high, but cohabitation in the 1920s, 30s in countries such as Costa Rica, Panama was around 15%, which is really high. But again, it's not only because of modernization, but it has to do with some other things that, again, we don't have time to discuss here. But we have some things that are actually popping out now in some European countries, and this is for Canada, which again, Canada is again, it's not the US, but it's not Europe, it's somewhere in between. And what we see here is what we call LAT couples. And LAT couples, essentially, what that means, it means living apart together, which are couples that are not living in the same place. Not in, they could be living in the same neighborhood, but not in the same house or in the same unit. But they recognize each other as a couple. They make investments. Sometimes they have children. They essentially they are a couple, but each one of them have their own apartment or their own house. Which again is like, why would you do that? Again, they do it. Probably they have dinner together every day, but they are not living together. So even though they are a family or a unit, they are still in the same places. So that reason is called living apart together, because each one of them is reporting a different place, but they, as I was saying, some of them actually have have children, have children, sorry, or have planning plans or are taking vacations all this time, or like every year, and they even have probably a joint bank account and all these things, but each one is keeping their own place. So this is by age group. And we can see, well, the white one is without a partner, so people being single and not reporting living with nobody. But between ages 20 to 24 and 25 to 29, we see uh, this LAT couple. And again, this LAT couple is something that is complicated. Yes, it is kind of difficult to visualize, like, why, if you have joint bank accounts, you have children, if you are doing everything together, and even they're having intercourse. Probably one night is in one apartment, and the other one night is in a different apartment, but they're still not living in the same place, which is something that actually this first pop up in France when they started, like, because actually they found out about this. Yeah, it could be, and that is something that, again, people my age, for instance, again, I am not really old, but I am closer to the 40s than to the 20s. Again, we get, or we start really liking our privacy. So for me, it's really complicated to share my place with somebody else. So actually, that was what they found in France, that these people were so used to having their own place, and even though they have children, they weren't, like, okay, the kids were sleeping a couple of days here, a couple of days here, probably kids were staying at the same place all the time, but they were, I mean, that's a different thing. They were having this thing, and the reason this happened was because In the census in France, I don't remember what year this they found out about this, and they counted the number of children. They were like, okay, we have way too many kids. Like, where are these kids coming from? Because they didn't know, and they were not expecting that number of children. So they started looking back, and they started like trying to keep like track these kids. And what happened was like the mom was reporting the kids living with her, and the dad was reporting the kids living with him. So the kids were counted twice. So they were like, okay, so we don't have this many kids. So what we have is that they were reported in each household in the census, and they started studying this. So again, there are so many things. So yes, yes. One expression is the one that Victoria had. The other expression is the one that Dara has. It's like probably yes, uh, different perspectives. But again, for us, it's like it's still I don't understand it because again, having two apartments in even here in Puebla is too expensive. Like, can you imagine Mexico City? And I'm using Mexico City because Mexico City is usually more like the cultural shift and social norms are more advanced than in some other states. But again, it can happen in many places in Mexico. But like having two apartments in Mexico City when you can pay for one rent, it's really something that is happening. But yes, this is well, it depends on where you. If you want to live in a place where you know you can open your door without getting stabbed right at that moment, you, rents can get really expensive. Again, you can live in Ecatepec, and that's gonna be fine, or probably for you it's gonna be cheap, but it's complicated. But yes, like an apartment in well, Iztapalapa is really big, so it has nice places and it has really creepy places. But I can tell you, rents around I don't know, like uh, well, if you want to live in Condesa, Roma, and those upscale neighborhoods, Polanco, a two-bedroom apartment can go easily go for like 15,000 or more. So it is really expensive. Mhm. Don't worry, you're gonna be actuaries. You can pay for that. But now, okay, something that happens is, oh, I'm paying. I used to pay more for a really small apartment in Mexico City than I'm paying for my small house here in Puebla. Okay, so sub replacement fertility. This is the other thing. The first thing was new cohabitation patterns that are weird but like going on. Now we have sub replacement fertility. So this is the total fertility rate for different countries in the world. So what we see is that we still have countries with high fertility, essentially in sub-Saharan Africa, all this area, and we have more Latin America. Most countries in Latin America are already somewhere between the 2.6, 2.2, 1.8, and so on. Some countries in Latin America have really low fertility, like Chile, and I think that would be, yeah, that's the lowest. But also Uruguay and these countries have really low fertility. But what we see is if we pay attention to Europe, all these countries, and again, and this way, I'm not going to exclude this. So they have really low fertility levels, around 1.8, 1.4, and even under 1.4, which is really small fertility. So what is happening is that now that the governments have to come up with all these plans, so all these provisions to take care of the elderly, and even to provide tax incentives for people to have kids. And some countries were open to migration. Some other countries are more not open to migration. But again, it is a combination of all of these strategies that these countries are following. So but something that we need to remember, and this is something that you already know, is that if we study fertility in Mexico, we have certain levels, but we know there's a significant variation within areas. And the same thing happens in Europe. So we have Spain and Portugal, for instance, with high fertility in this northern area, which again is an area that has developed a lot recently, and they have economic growth. So people here are having more kids, and there's also some cultural shift they're going on. But here is this map, and I should explain. This is replacement is in white. Mhm. And this is sub replacement. I am actually going the other way around. So if the darker the red is how far they are below sub replacement. Sorry, I was confused. So actually, it's the opposite explanation here. So this area, which again has been developing, people are not having kids. We have, well, this again, this is also Europe, but this is Turkey again. We have they are above replacement. And yes, we know they were above replacement. There are some spots here that it would be really interesting to see what is happening. But as you can see, there are areas where replacement levels are way down in certain, and I think this is the capital probably in Greece, and but there are differences. So some places are not that bad, or they don't have really low fertility. Some places have really low fertility. So this is when we have to understand again, like Italy is not the same uh, for all the countries. So there are differences between southern, central, and northern Italy, and the same thing happens in France. The same thing happens in Spain. So and it's gonna be something similar if we try to do it here in Mexico at the municipal level. And even in the same state, we have differences, really important differences when it comes to fertility, and it can be because of the labor market, can be because of access to public health, to contraception, or just because people are thinking differently. So they have different perspectives in life. So it is always interesting to try to get these things at the municipal level or a lower level. But it's complicated because now sometimes we don't have information, we don't have enough data that we can contrast, so we can see. But what is happening in general is that yes, Europe is below fertility in general, but we have to pay attention to specific trends. And this is also something important, as I was telling you, the disconnection between having kids and getting married. So we have that this is the proportion of births happening outside marriage. Well, it was in 2016. And as you can see, the green ones, essentially those who have higher proportion of babies being born outside of marriage, are these countries, which again is not something that is indicating um, a problem, because again sometimes again we are coming here in Mexico thinking about babies being born outside of marriage and probably like, oh my god, but no, it's not necessarily that. It's just like these couples probably they were in cohabitation, or they just decided to have kids, and now it's really common to say for some women say, okay, I want to have a kid. I am a single woman. I can do it, and they go and they get a baby. Well, that they go to a clinic and everything. So again, these things are happening in these countries, and for different reasons, for different things. But as you can see, there are still some countries, like, yes, in these countries that are probably more conservative. Again, the proportion is really small. The same happens in Poland, that is a really conservative country, Italy as well. So there are these differences. But again, 70% in Iceland here, 70% of all births are outside of marriage. And again, this is a country where we can see that this is a choice. It's not something that we should be afraid of. So nowadays, again, here is like more modern couples and different perspectives there. They like probably you know someone or are familiar with people who decided to have it like that. And again, this is happening, and this is changing the way that we see families in in general. And this is for Europe, and we have more information from Europe than for Latin America. But it is happening as well, and it's and we're seeing this shift in these values and norms, and is and again that has to do with a lot of economic reasons, but also just people just deciding to have a different perspective in life. And this has and again, this is not only that I am here just talking about this because I find it interesting, but also I remember a few years ago when I was in the PhD, they were developing this new policy in England because they were having issues. Insurance companies were having issues whenever, for example, some people, somebody been getting into the hospital, but they were requiring requiring a family member or some relative to be there and to sign everything and to be the official link between the insurance company and the person in the hospital. But then they started finding out that a lot of these people actually they were not around their relatives. They were living with their friends. They were living with their partners in life. Sometimes same sex couple that never get married or some other perspectives. So I remember that the title of this paper was "My Friends Are My Family," and they were discussing these things like, okay, how should insurance companies act, or do we need to have a new change in legislation, in law in the country that is going to allow for friends to actually not only like being able to make the decision when let's say that somebody's in a coma, like who gets to make the choice of unplug this individual. By law is only a relative, but they were saying, okay, but this person's relatives, they haven't spoke to this person in 25 years. So now somebody who doesn't even know uh, what this person wants is going to make is going to yeah to make this decision, which is probably not the ideal thing. On the other hand, how can we actually tell that this friend or this partner has the legal right to do it? So again, there's a big discussion in all those things that we have to pay attention, or even receiving benefits for pensions. For in Mexico, is really clear. You have to be married or in a common law marriage. Again, something that is recognized by law and everything. But now we have these changes, and what is going to happen for these couples that have been in cohabitation, and for some reason because you can go and get a cohabitation evidence, but again, it's really complicated, and even nowadays, families have more rights than cohabiting partners uh, for the law. So again, we need to discuss these things, and we need to try to see, okay, from our perspective, what can we do, or how can we measure these things are going on. And again, these people are not having kids, so pensions are going to be different, and so many things that are happening. Okay, so questions? Mhm. Exactly, that is one a good question. What do married couple get more benefits? Mhm. And even a few years ago, like daycare, like official daycare, like from Seguro Social and all those things, was only available for women, for working women. And there was actually, but this couple had to go to the Supreme Court, and they were like, okay, this guy is working in a company, whatever, a lab, let's say, and his wife, she has a table that she takes out on the streets, and she's selling candy. But the problem was that she needs the time to work, so she needs daycare, so she needs to, or they need, as a couple, they need daycare available for both of them to be able to work. But since she was not registered for an official employment, they didn't have that benefit. So this guy, even though he was working for one institution, and he had access to IMSS and everything, they were stopping him to use daycare. And that was a big thing in the Supreme Court. And actually, at the end of the day, they say, okay, men are also eligible for daycare. And but by doing this, is not benefiting men. Essentially, benefiting these women that they, because they have a formal employment, but they are doing a lot of things. Or think about, and again, not probably, I don't know, in our relatives, but think about women selling Avon or Mary Kay and all these things. So they have to go house by house or move around town, and they need to be free, and they don't have a formal employment, or they don't have an employment that is recognized for IMSS. So, but if they have a partner who has access to IMSS, then they should be able to use daycare. And that was, again, this is something that is happening. This is something that we need to discuss. This cultural shift still is cultural, but then we have to start having a discussion. And again, I don't know if you know that, when was that they approved the recreational use of things. So again, those things are important as well, but we need to also include these discussions, like who's gonna take care of me. I realized that I had one of these issues when I got a surgery 3 years ago, And I was like, yes, I have this surgery, blah, blah, blah. I have everything planned for the hospital. And then they asked me, so who's going to be with you? And I was like, but I have to call my mom, and mom, can you come please and be with me at the hospital, because they are asking me to have a relative there with me, because I have too many friends, and they were like, oh, I can go, but the hospital was like, no, we need a relative here. So again, those things are happening, and we need to be able to discuss or to modify law. Again, yes, married couples have lots of benefits, uh, and we need to see what is happening or what is going to happen in few years. So all these things are things that, even though we probably we would think, okay, like for actuaries this has no consequence, but yes, if the guy has access, let's say that I have access, or because I do, I have my insurance for from UDLAB, health insurance. I can go to Angeles Puebla, I can go to Hospital Puebla, or these nice hospitals, because I have that benefit. If I decide, if I'm having a baby with a friend, let's say that we just, like in the movies, like what if we are single at age 40 and we have not, we are having a baby. Let's say that we say that. If we are not married, she is not eligible for my benefits, even though that kid is going to be mine. So again, we need, as actors, we need to start thinking, okay, how are we going to include this new perspective and these new things into our process of creating new insurance, or who has access to joint accounts. For instance, joint accounts are problematic. You need to prove to the bank that you're a couple. And again, sometimes it's like, and sometimes it's because of safety, like they don't let you share your account with somebody who you cannot prove that you're legally married to. But that's something that we need to discuss. Again, we need to understand that this is happening, and then we need to be able to adapt to these changes. But why? Because that is where we're coming from, a conservative society. And again, it's not bad by definition, but because when these laws were created, it was in the 1920s, 1940s, it was long time ago. Now we need to start essentially paying attention to these things, and seeing what the things that we need to change. Like last night, I went to get my INE from Puebla. Now, where is Victoria? Victoria, I got an INE from Puebla, so I am officially living in Puebla now. Well, San Andres Cholula. And then I saw that it was forbidden for women to wear headscarves. And for me, it was shocking. Like, what if we have a Muslim lady coming here and she has to get an INE? She cannot wear her headscarf, and that is something, actually, for me, that's discrimination. For INE is not. But again, there's a big discussion about so many things that we need to have. And again, sorry, it's 9:45. So if we could have this talk some other day. If you want, on Tuesday we can talk on doing asesorías. Okay. So if there are no questions or no comments, see you next week. Have a nice long weekend. Yes, Victoria.
Una pregunta. Para la actividad número 12, que es de nupcialidad, bueno, ¿dónde podemos, pues es la